One of the most profitable men in best ball is taking a brief hiatus from his slow draft hell to join me, Tom Strachan, on the unofficial home of DraftKings Best Ball in Europe. This is the Fantasy Sanctuary Best Ball Show. Let's get into it. Yes, that is right. We've got the one and only Pat Kerrane joining me this afternoon. 5,000 miles between us, but best ball brings everyone together. How you doing, Pat?
I'm doing good. Yeah, excited to talk best ball, do a little draft. Should be a good time.
So I know, like, a lot of people tend to stick to one platform, and you've had plenty of success on Underdog. You know, you were profitable there substantially 2 years ago, and then last year you had a number of decent teams as well. How have you done in the DraftKings best ball streets over the last couple of years?
Not as well, and I haven't hit it as hard. DraftKings 2 years ago, I didn't do a ton of. The last year I did the 555s. I didn't come close to maxing it, but I fired a decent amount. I didn't make any of the finals. I had one team come like razor thin close to getting in. I had like some okay sweats in like the 40. It was a $44 tournament or something in that kind of price point. But yeah, I've definitely done better on Underdog by a lot. And DraftKings is interesting because I think like quarterback theoretically is worth less and can be put together later, but they go earlier. And then like there's something I haven't quite figured out how to attack this, but like it does seem like when there's that guy you need that week, like you really do need to have him on DraftKings in a way where it's a bit easier on Underdog just because like you don't have the bonuses, you don't have the full PPR. So when like a pass catcher goes absolutely nuclear, you can still sometimes get teams through without him. But I don't know how to like take advantage of that. Like I'm not sure exactly what that means I should do differently on DraftKings. But that's definitely something that kind of I'm like mulling how I can adjust my DK strategy a little bit to kind of account for that.
Yeah, like I think the 100-yard bonuses is something that obviously we know what a difference maker it can be in DFS because we have such a prolonged amount of those slates and stuff, but it's kind of harder to drill down on DraftKings and work out how much of a difference is that making week to week, how difficult is it to overcome. But like you say, like Underdog having 18 roster spots, but then on DraftKings having 20, it really feels like the nuclear weeks can be insane. Like I've had weeks where I've had rosters put up 230, 240 points, and you just go,
right.
That can open up such a huge leverage on the rest of the people within your league. As you say, like the QBs with the 300-yard passing game is quite a decent bonus to be getting, but it's quite a difficult stat to kind of project unless you have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes a few years ago, where it seemed like, like well over half the games he played, he was getting that bonus. And it is quarterbacks I kind of want to drill into a little bit before we get into the draft, because we were chatting before we came on, like how DraftKings can be really interesting because of the quarterback landscape. And it feels like the elite players are really worth taking a bit of time to consider over there. In terms of if you threw ADP out completely, would Josh Allen still be your quarterback one this year with all the changes that have been happening in Buffalo?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Allen, it's that he can do everything, right? He's got the rushing. He's such a – I think, they've kind of made noises at times about moving away from him at the goal line or about, kind of in rushing in general. But, like, James Cook is, the lead back. And I know they brought in Ray Davis and, he should be like a sufficient short yardage guy, but it's not like they didn't bring in Braylon Allen or something. Like they didn't, to me, they're signaling they're almost, going to be more reliant on Allen at the goal line than in years past. And then like, I don't know, I'm not that worried about like that worried about the Bills, like floor, it's like, I don't think it's going to get as bad as the Chiefs got last year in terms of like, just not having anybody. Like Curtis Samuel has been like a totally professional wide receiver for a while. Dalton Kincaid was pretty solid last year. I don't know if he's going to succeed as the number one. We might be overdrafting him. I'm taking him, but it's possible we look back and it's like, yeah, that was pretty rich. But I also think he's like a solid piece of a passing game, So I think we could end up kind of feeling like Allen spread the ball out a little bit. They rotate. There was like a little bit more of a rotation. Maybe it feels a little like more like Green Bay, where like we're having trouble week to week getting a sense of like which guy it's going to be. But I don't know. I think it's still Allen. Like he's also going to throw to James Cook a little bit more, I think, given what we saw at the end of last year under Joe Brady. So I'm still confident that it should be Allen, just given his talent.
Yeah. We are going to be drafting in the Draftkings Milly Maker. See a few questions in the chat. We'll get into that in sort of 5-10 minutes time. Appreciate everybody in the chat hanging out. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Been a great month of content over here. Just going back to Josh Allen, like I've been kind of deep in the weeds on QB stats lately, and he's been a top 5 quarterback in 39% of his starts across the course of his career, which is just kind of a ludicrous number, really. But you touched on it a little bit, but in terms of Josh Allen, when you take him, are you being more aggressive on stacks when you get him? Because if you're saying, okay, Josh Allen is going to be the QB 1 overall or worth that price at very least, are we also saying that Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel probably really ball out as well?
I think you are saying that there are some underpriced bills. I think that's pretty clear. That's probably just true. And so, but now, like, you need to go find them. When you take Allen, I think you do want to go find those guys. The other thing is that when you take Allen, you have spent a really high pick on a quarterback in a landscape where wide receivers are going higher than ever. So you're now kind of you're not like crazy behind, but like, let's say you have Breece Hall and Josh Allen, like if then you take Kincaid, I'm in these underdog slow drafts and I have like, I went like Breece Hall, Chris Olave, Josh Allen, Kincaid. Oh, it's like, let's say Josh Allen, Kincaid, James Cook, right? So I'm like, I got one wide receiver through 5 rounds. And then it's like the only thing, that team's kind of dead to begin with. But the only thing that would save it is if I basically hit the wide receivers and it makes Allen worth that pick. So I think like reaching for Keon Coleman, make sure you get Curtis Samuel, like don't push Curtis Samuel, taking him in the 8th or 9th, like is fine there. Like, and I think there might be a version of that team where you have like 2 wide receivers through 5 rounds. That's pretty powerful if those guys hit. So I think I've tried to experiment and push it and see if I can just do one. I don't think you can. I think you got to skip Cook there, take a receiver, something like that. But, yeah, I mean, I think you do want to target those guys when you take Allen.
Do you think it's more viable to do that kind of build on DraftKings than on Underdog? I know like Hayden Winks is kind of very strong on the idea we want 4 wide receivers through 7 rounds to really succeed. But like I've looked at some of the finalist teams over the last couple of years. And 2 years ago, there were almost as many robust RB teams in the finals as there were 0 RB teams. I haven't got into last year's data quite as much yet, but I would be surprised if it wasn't quite 0 wide receiver heavy. But do you think having those extra 2 rounds just gives you that little bit more scope to go, okay, as long as by round 12, I've probably got 6 wide receivers, can I get away with it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what my inclination would be that if you're going to go light at wide receiver, you would really want to push running back through, like, let's say you had a Breece Hall, James Cook, and now, you've got Dalton Kincaid, Josh Allen, and 1 wide receiver through 5 rounds, which would be pretty extreme. I think you would really want to skip running back for a long time and maybe use those extra couple rounds to kind of build out, and you also have Dalton Kincaid and you also have Josh Allen. So like, to me, I'm like, I would want to just hammer wide receiver for a long time. The problem is that the reason I think those builds are tricky is because like it's easier said than done to hammer wide receivers through round 8, 9, 10. Like it's all running backs on the board. So you're like, okay, I guess it means I'm taking Deontay Johnson, Christian Watson, like Curtis Samuel, like 20 picks ahead of ADP. It just sort of feels like there's just not any wide receivers going there. So you can't like really say you're structuring your team to hammer wide receivers in rounds where no wide receivers are drafted. Is what makes it difficult. Because I think theoretically it could be cool, but it's just hard to actually execute.
Yeah, I was drafting in the Milly Maker with Colin Kelly of RotoViz yesterday, and we saw a team that started hero wide receiver with Jamar Chase and then took their next wide receiver at the 11th pick, the 11th round.
11th round? Wow.
Yeah, they ended up with 9 wide receivers total and stopped at 5 running backs, but it was a pretty scary build. I think you can kind of see a world where things maybe materialize at times for it, but it's not something I'd be kind of comfortable doing.
Yeah, the one thing I could see, I think there's a group, right? There's the Sutton, Mike Williams, Curtis Samuel, and then like kind of into the Shaheed, Shakir. You got like Jerry Jeudy, Tyler Lockett, part of that first group. There's like this group of starting NFL receivers and some interesting rookies like A.D. Mitchell in that range that are like maybe they're kind of 7th, 8th round picks of years past. Like it's possible. Like the problem is that all the underdog data suggests that you want to have at least 4 or 5 wide receivers by that point. Like what it's sort of like this year's ADP is like, what if, is it like the 7th round wide receiver that's been the reason to do that? Or was it the 3 receivers you took before that guy that are the, I think it's the 3 receivers before, but maybe what if you have, 2 good receivers and then like 4 7th round picks from a couple years ago kind of thing. Like I think some of these profiles feel legitimately undervalued. Like I think Sutton is undervalued. Some of them just kind of seem more boring, like Mike Williams. I don't know how undervalued he actually is, but
Steph in the chat saying I've done this team and I don't feel great about it. I mean, absolutely. In terms of other quarterbacks and sort of talking about value, the one that's kind of I keep struggling with, I don't want none of, but CJ Stroud, did you expect him to be this highly drafted amongst quarterbacks when drafts opened?
I didn't. It does remind me a bit of Trevor Lawrence last year, where it's sort of aspirational. I think the difference for me is that last year I thought the Ridley price was a little bit nuts, and I didn't love Kirk. It was okay at cost. I like him a lot more this year. Somehow his prices dropped after Ridley left, which okay. But Stroud, like. I actually like Nico Collins. I don't mind taking Diggs. I like Tank Dell. So there's a lot of teams where I have one of his pass catchers. What I've been experimenting with recently is saying, I'm going to take Andrews on the other side of this and just leave it as a mini. And then I'm going to replace quarterback later because I probably find I'm going to be able to more easily find quarterback points than elite tight end points. If Andrews is the guy, like you're going to want him in a way where like, even if Stroud's the guy, like it can I approximate him with like Jaden Daniels and, a couple stacked pocket passers later, like maybe I can. So I'm experimenting a little bit more with that, but I have taken a fair amount of Stroud. I'm not fading Stroud again, cause he's so stackable.
Yeah. I kind of struggle because it's like try to work out how much more fantasy ceiling does he have beyond last year? Because like last year, he was responsible for the highest quarterback score of all in 2023. But he also was responsible for only one more of the top 100 weekly scores from quarterbacks. And when you look at the dual threats this year, and there are so many really strong options at dual threats, I just kind of struggle a little bit pricing him as highly with them. I mean, the exception being Patrick Mahomes, because we've seen him so often do it. I mean, He's been a top 5 quarterback almost as often as Josh Allen has, despite not rushing as much. So, yeah, I've got more questions about quarterbacks, but let's get into a draft because, the people want it. It's always good to get drafted and we can talk as we go. How many of the Milly Makers have you done so far, Pat?
I'm now behind because I did a bunch early and then not by a bunch, I mean like 15. But now I need to get to 26 to get that that May perk, and I'm
So I've heard it from the chat that it's 25 will get you
25. Will okay.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to throw that extra 26 one in as security, but their chat, for what it's worth, told me 25.
Okay.
But yeah, if this is your first time finding us here at Fantasy Sanctuary, truly appreciate you checking us out tonight. Hit the subscribe button down below. Mondays, Underdog Drafts with Tyler, who you definitely know from various chats and streams around the industry. Tuesday, drafting with Colm Kelly of Rotoviz every week on the DraftKings streets, and Wednesday with a host of guests, including Ian Hartitz, Justin Herzig, and more over the next few weeks. Pat, this is possibly the first early pick I've had in quite a while. Sitting
Nice.
at the 2 pick here, have you been getting much luck with these kind of picks lately?
I mean, when you enter like 200 slow drafts, you pick everywhere. That's the one advantage, is that you don't get tilted that you don't have enough 102s. I got plenty. I got plenty of 102s. Too many 102s, you might say.
It's definitely family and friends draft. A lot of people from our Discord in here tonight. We've got Riverman at the 1, and we've got Steph at the 103, who is always a tricky person to draft next to. Rory down at the 108, and Deft Angel and Michael Heary and ADS 827 at the back. A lot of familiar names. If you want to hit the join button, you get access to my best ball rankings, richest dynasty content, including 200 pages of rookie guide, 40% off all Spike Week products, and so much more. So in terms of these DraftKings drafts, I know from listening to your content, you've been quite zero running back heavy to start the year. Is that if
not really? I've wanted to be, but
really?
I'm getting buffeted by all these values, and I have trouble staying on track. But yeah, I think it's actually difficult to draft zero running back right now.
It's so how, I mean, we can get to it as we go, but how much do you feel, where do you feel like the dead zone starts and kind of goes to this year? Is it the Devon A-Chain area or before that?
Well, Achane doesn't strike me as a dead zone back like at all. I think he's kind of a classic. Like, we tend to do, I mean, he's probably more similar to like Antonio Gibson when we had him up in the second round and then he busted. Not to say he couldn't bust, but he feels more like that aspirational guy.
Yeah. So CMC went off the 101. CD Lamb, or you make a case for anyone, Pat?
Lamb.
Yeah. That's
yeah, I mean, it's like I like Achane a lot. I think he's a really strong pick. I think we're playing for weekly ceiling. Guy has 50 points in his box score. I mean, like, come on. It's like, oh no, he doesn't play like all the snaps. Like that's not a, if that's like the worry for a year 2 undersized back, and like he's coming off historic efficiency, perfect fit for the system that he was in. Not just a guy who ripped off big plays, but like consistently was efficient, like led the NFL in NFL Next Gen success rate. I mean, he was super, super consistent, and that fit with his prospect profile where it's like, hey, this guy's actually like a legit between the tackles running back. He's not just like a speed pitch this guy the ball, he tries to get to the edge kind of dude. Although certainly if he gets to the edge, you're in trouble. So I don't know. To me, Achane is very much not part of like the dead zone. I think he's part of like what we're trying to do when we take running backs early. We're trying to swing for the fences, have guys produce stuff that you can't replicate later. You can't. And I think to me, like McCaffrey, Brees, Bijan, Gibbs, especially in PPR, and then Achane all fit that mold. Taylor, I honestly, Gibbs has some red flags. He wasn't that efficient as a receiver last year, but he has such a good prospect profile as a receiver and earned that role right away as a rookie that I'm mostly willing to kind of take the leap of faith with him. Bijan was not as efficient as you would hope last year, but I'm willing to take the leap of faith with him. Taylor's where I start to get a little shaky, especially in half PPR, where I'm like kind of betting on like a bounce back profile, like a year 5 bounce back. In this landscape, that's a little concerning to me. In the second round, I like it more on underdog.
Yeah, it's like, you can tell yourself a story it's quite hard to imagine him losing touches to anyone who's currently on the roster in week 17.
Right.
But kind of felt that about last year's roster, and then Zach Moss comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's just that he's replaceable. It's that the production is replaceable at running back is what you're. And I mean, like, it's not like does he lose touches to Evan Hall? It's does he outscore David Montgomery, Najee Harris, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, like all these dudes who go around 6 or later? Like, I don't know, probably, but how much? You know, like what did I give up to get the extra 3 points he gave me or whatever?
Yeah, and it's just not the Jonathan Taylor thing. Yeah, I kind of go back and forth because it's like, well, he's not going to catch you 6 balls a game, is he? And then where I can kind of get past that with Devon Achan and sort of like, okay, he's probably not going to give me 17 games of health, but we've seen the hyper efficiency with that offense and how explosive he can be. I can kind of excuse that, and I find Achan an easier click than I do Jonathan Taylor. But I do like the Colts offense, and I do want to be in on them.
Achan's, to me, the type of profile we should be more excited about the cheaper running backs are in general. Because it's like, before, remember like 5 years ago, it's like, well, I have to draft a running back who's going to get me all the touches because I can't find guys with jobs later. Like later, I'm going to have to, in the 7th round, I'm going to be drafting like Darwin Thompson, right? Justice Hill is going to be a 9th round pick. Like, these are like actual high stakes ADPs. Like this happened, you know, and like so you get to a point where like you have like the touches plus the upside is such an important combo, but we get the touches for free. The touches are free. Devin Singletary, Zeke Elliott, like literally free. So why not just take the upside and backfill the touches?
Yeah, this draft, we'll get to a couple of picks in a minute that are worth touching on, but we're back on wide receivers.
I ruined the A-Chain thing, sorry.
Yeah.
I would do Waddle here, I think.
I'm down with Waddle. I heard yourself and Jacob Sanderson talking about him over the weekend, and very much was in agreement on a lot of your points. I think what we saw last year, you know, heading into the bye week for the Dolphins, Mike McDaniel was saying the one priority he had was to get Jalen Waddle going again. And then he gets another injury and kind of gets another knock, and it just never really happened. But I'd be fully ready to take him this year. We're back on with our CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle picks. Saquon, Kyron Williams, Travis Kelce, Mike Evans, and then it's down to like Devonta Smith for me. Anybody you want to pound the table?
I mean, I would do Diggs. I would do Kelce. Those would probably be my top picks.
Let's go Diggs. I don't have too much Diggs so far, so that should be kind of fun. The pick which I was alluding to, of course, was things get wild on DraftKings sometimes, and Patrick Mahomes goes at 105, followed by Travis Etienne in the 2nd round. We brought it on by talking about the elite quarterbacks, perhaps, and
I guess so.
Much as this felt like it was going to be a smart draft room, can't always allow for one person. We've got a question from Deft Angel. Interested to hear if Pat thinks pulling Laporta up to the 301 is worth it for the correlation, given your stance on elite tight ends.
No, I don't think it is at all. I think the week 17 stuff is a really good tiebreaker, and it's really nice to. I think personally, it's much easier to build good teams if you're thinking about week 17. But the reason is that it allows you to kind of build in extra flexibility throughout the draft. It kind of also, in a lot of cases, sort of sets you up for optionality because you start to have both sides of a game. And then, like, for example, if you have the Chargers and you're sort of naturally breaking ties to Patriots and you've sort of stacked up both sides of the game and you get sniped on Herbert, you can just go to May. And there's several other games like that where you can just, that didn't happen. I'm going to go to the other side and, take that quarterback and not get like locked out of a thing you were building. You just have the other quarterback from it. So I tend to really try to build with it in mind. But what I don't want to do is like drastically change a player's ADP because of a fairly minor factor. Like Sam Laporta at the 3-1 is going to be a good pick if he is the clear-cut tight end 1 this year, and there's no touchdown regression or anything. Like, that's
the big worry, the touchdown regression. I mean, if you took away 3 touchdowns from him, brought him back down to 6 in line with pretty much all the other top tight ends. Then he goes from tight end 1 to tight end 4 all of a sudden. And missing by that much when you're paying the 301 just feels like it could be really tricky. And you made a great point recently talking about how when you're taking Travis Kelce in the second round, you know, you're getting the number 1 target earner in Kansas City, but when you're taking Sam Laporta, you are getting the second option in Detroit, and it can just be quite a costly thing to do that. Yeah,
like as likely as it is that Trey McBride's the number 2 in Arizona, we don't know that for sure this year. We're pretty sure, but I'm less sure than I am about the Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown target pecking order. Like, that's not even a question, you know. Like, Mark Andrews might not be the number 1, but he's got a better chance than Laporta. You know, there's like Kincaid has a better chance than Laporta. Like, I don't know, Laporta's price already seemed like very optimistic to me. And I like the elite tight ends in general, but to me, it's like I can get Kelce on underdog. You're getting Kelce in the 4th now. I know he's a lot more expensive here. McBride, Andrews, Kincaid, like those are the guys that I'm really trying to be overweight on. Laporta, I thought was overpriced, and honestly, try building with him in these rooms on underdog right now. You know, in these rooms, I guess you might be in trouble here as well. Like, if you take him in the 3rd, it's like, man, I just go back and I look back at the teams. I'm like, I would trade Laporta for any wide receiver in this range. It is just so hard to build with him.
Yeah, and as Nick says, like, it's already baking in a guaranteed progression as a year 2 player, and not considering that maybe you already hit a really high end outcome of year 1.
And that's right.
I think some of the stuff they do is sticky, like the amount of times they put him in motion, they really use him to a degree that you don't always see tight ends being used. But the touchdowns are just, yeah, it's such a difficult thing to bank on year to year, and I would definitely be slightly wary of it. Back to our team at the 105 who followed Patrick Mahomes and Travis Etienne up with the Lamar Jackson pick. It's definitely going to be...
It's that kind of room.
I mean, it feels like we've got about at least 8 or 9 very smart people in here building some quite nice teams. And then we've probably got 1 or 2 that are going to make our lives difficult. So we have CeeDee Lamb.
I'm not complaining so far.
Yeah, so we got CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, and Stephon Diggs coming up on our pick, with Steph just ahead of us. At the top of the list, players like Isaiah Pacheco, Amari Cooper, Dalton Kincaid, George Pickens, James Cook, Rashad White, and of course, Mark Andrews, who
I'd
could
be
push
Andrews,
around.
I think.
Do you want to push him around the corner and see if he comes back to us? I mean, Pat, Derrick Henry's fallen 22 picks past ADP.
I mean, I guess, yeah. If you want to do it, we can do it. Yeah, sure.
I just like scooping that much value this early on in the draft feels.
And you know what? It didn't click for me that the guy out of the 1 hole had Laporta. So pushing Andrews actually is really sharp.
Yeah,
I just want to take Andrews, man. That's it.
Well, it gives us quite a nice week 17 correlation without having to kind of really push anything too much. And maybe the team at the 101 wouldn't have gone with Derrick Henry, having already taken Christian McCaffrey. But I feel like if Leone was on here, he'd be screaming at us to take the discount. And
Leone was right. That was the right move. You were right, and Leone was right.
I keep trying to look.
That's a pretty nice start.
I'm a Ravens fan. It's not hard to tell with the 2 shirts behind me, and it just feels like at the minute I've done an awful lot of draft streams between the underdog drafts with Tyler, the shows with Colm, and the Ravens. The top 3 just keep falling in a way to the point where myself and Colm on the Rotoviz channel last Tuesday, we ended up with the triple stack of Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and Lamar, not having to take any of them ahead of ADP. Wow. I know that was something you talked about with Jacob. Have you managed to land it in any slows yet?
I haven't landed it yet. I'm trying with Zay. The problem is that I don't like to take Zay too early in the 3rd. And when you're saying you didn't take any past ADP, are you telling me that you got...
We got Andrews back. We got Andrews in the 5th. So we got
5th.
Yeah, we were picking at the 10th
so you
spot.
took Zay in the 3rd.
Yeah, we were 10 or the 11th spot, and we took Zay, Lamar around the turn, and then Andrews came all the way back.
That's amazing.
It was beautiful.
Oh,
Speaking of
I'm so
beautiful
jealous.
things, Tyler saying, if you hit that like button, if we get to 100 likes on any show, a very special live draft is unlocked on this channel. Not entirely sure what he has planned for us, but I gave him the keys to the StreamYard, so Tyler will do what Tyler's going to do and make it all worth your while if you hit that
Good
like
God.
button. That's it. It's going to be interesting. Anthony Richardson.
It will be that. It will be that.
Anthony Richardson going off at the 508. How high are you on Anthony Richardson? Like, what kind of, if you could take a guess at what exposure you're going to end up with to Anthony Richardson by the time draft shuts, what's like the ideal goal for you?
I definitely want to be overweight on Richardson. I think, to me, like the big priority is because wide receivers are just up, right? So wide receivers are more expensive. So that's changing the prices on a lot of stuff. To me, the priority is find the tight end one in the 4th or 5th round. That's priority number one. Priority number one is don't get buried at wide receiver, right? So make sure you just come out with sufficient wide receiver firepower. So that's priority one. Priority two is also find the tight end one. Priority three for me would probably be attack some of these elite quarterbacks who you can stack up with the elite tight ends. This is what's kind of so crazy, right? Like you're getting Lamar, Andrews, Mahomes, Kelsey, Kincaid, Allen. So like if that's the elite tight end, if that's the elite quarterback that you want this year, and then you're getting the onesie, like even if the elite tight end doesn't hit for the whole season, but you are getting spike weeks funneled through a onesie position, like, man, that's going to be pretty powerful, I think. And it's just kind of nice how those three different guys give you the access to that. And then also Stroud, you got the Andrews bring back on that. So he pairs pretty nicely. So my lowest priority is trying to scoop some of these running back values. That's why I was a little lukewarm on like Henry. Cause like, I do like getting some exposure to Henry, and that's a really nice price, but
yeah,
the Henry, Jacobs, those guys are dead zone backs. That's the dead zone profile.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as a biased Ravens fan, I've been a little hesitant to get too carried away on Derrick Henry early on. Just going back to your tight ends thing, like one of the things that's making it an easier click for me is, and I put this in the tight end video that I posted on Saturday. If you haven't already, check that out. It's in the link description below.
It's a great video.
Cheers. It's much. Well, I mean, I referenced a lot of your work, so I'm not surprised. But 6 of the top 7 most expensive tight ends are inside the top 10 teams in implied odds totals for the playoff stretch. So it's like it's not
cool.
just betting on players who we know to have like higher outcomes than some of the tight ends further down. It's just betting on good offenses in general. And if you're going to just do one thing in best ball, betting on good offenses seems like a good sort of process, really. We are seeing some running backs start to go off. The team at the 107 started Justin Jefferson, then went Jonathan Taylor, Devonta Smith, Josh Jacobs, Rashad White. Kenneth Walker's possibly the only one of those guys I would have liked. Is any of these running backs you've gone off in the last sort of 12 picks or so guys you've been taking much of, Pat?
Yeah, Mixon. I would say Cook, Mixon, and then Walker to a lesser extent. But Cook and Mixon, I think is a legitimately underpriced running back. Again, you're betting on explosiveness, receiving versatility. He's in a really good offense. I think the talent-based bet on Cook is pretty strong. I think like once Pacheco gets in the 5th, like I don't mind him there. Rashad White, I think, should be more like in the 6th. Honestly, even 7th. But 6th, it seems fine to me. I'm passing the 5th though. What are we doing?
So a wide receiver, it's getting a little dry. 10 picks ahead of ADP, but DeAndre Hopkins, Brian Thomas, Rashee Rice, Deontay Johnson. Should we grab one of these here before things start getting a bit more desperate? I'd be leaning towards DeAndre Hopkins.
That works for me.
Why is DeAndre Hopkins getting drafted later than Calvin Ridley, Pat?
I don't know. He was elite last year. Like look at his basically like pick a metric. He was incredible in open score. He had an elite yards per route run. He played. He's in the stable position. They brought in Calvin Ridley, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll use him somewhat like Jamar Chase." But like, he's not going to be Jamar Chase. He's still Calvin Ridley. That's how that works.
Yeah, so if we wanted a wide receiver, it's pretty much Rashee Rice or Christian Watson.
I like Rice a lot here. What is our 5th wide receiver?
Yeah,
yeah, we can get by. We can get by.
And I think in terms of his price, he's only going to start rising. I think, the suspension stuff feels like it's not going to be as bad as it was. But yeah, like just going back to DeAndre Hopkins, and I know Pete's talked about this a lot, about how it's much harder for players to fall, but it just seems like people are completely happy to take Calvin Ridley when he had an iffy year last year with a quarterback that we all say is a good quarterback, at least at a bare minimum. Nobody's arguing that Will Levis is better than better than Will. Will Levis is not better than Trevor Lawrence in any way. So the idea that Calvin Ridley should be going ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, I really struggle with it. And for now, I'm just quite happy to keep taking DeAndre Hopkins, particularly as it feels like the edge of that wide receiver cliff edge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to take a lot of wide receivers early. Calvin Ridley strikes me as like a legitimately terrible pick where he goes. I'm really no interest at all. He wasn't good last year. He wasn't good the year before he got suspended for a year. So it's not good, suspended, not good, right? We got an older wide receiver. He's changing teams. He gets a big quarterback downgrade. He also goes like, people aren't particularly enthused about Christian Kirk, who's now very kind of clearly the number 1 wide receiver on the Jags, yet he goes like in the 5th round. So, okay, the clear number 1 wide receiver on the Jags with Trevor Lawrence, and you're not that into it. Would it even be fair to say that he's not as good as DeAndre Hopkins? So like, Calvin Ridley's going from, my point being, Calvin Ridley's target competition might actually be, a little bit more difficult from the number, at least for, to be the number 1. I think maybe if Hopkins doesn't fall off, he's got a harder time being the number 1 this year than he even did last year when he wasn't passing Christian Kirk. And we haven't seen any signs of Hopkins falling off. He tied with Garrett Wilson in open score last year. Like, I really don't get the Ridley one. It's like, I think he should be going in like the 90s. Like, he's 1.57 yards per hour last year, and then he gets a quarterback downgrade. Like, this dude's like closer to Brandon Cooks than he is to someone I would take in the 6th.
So one of the quarterbacks I wanted to pick your mind on as well, Kyler Murray, who goes in the 7th round there. Like, he's a player who a lot of people seem to be a little bit down on, but it's undeniable like that having Marvin Harrison is going to be very much a good thing for him. Even last year when he came back from the ACL injury, he still averaged over 5 rush attempts per game. That kind of feels like the barrier for me, that like you need your dual threats to be rushing above that number in order to really hit. Do you think there's a realistic outcome where Kyler Murray's like a top 3 quarterback this year?
I don't know if he'd be top 3, but like, I think there's lots of outcomes where we're very happy to have Kyler Murray stacked up, and he's very stackable. I like both of his top weapons. I'm not sitting out Marvin Harrison. I know he's extremely pricey, but I'm just not sitting it out. And then I like McBride. So I'm taking some Murray. I'm a little annoyed that like the market does seem kind of on this to me. Like you have to like take the leap of faith that he gets back to the pre-injury form. But if he does, the upside is there. And so the market, I think correctly, is making us pay for that, which I find annoying because I would rather get it at a discount.
And both our favorite running backs, Jaylen Warren does go off at the 803. Didn't expect him to make it back with this many people from my Discord and your Discord in this draft. Do you think that Jaylen Warren can legitimately overtake the job, or are you just quite happy buying in, saying, okay, 8th round pick for him, 9th round pick for Najee Harris, I'll just take the timeshare if I have to?
I mean, so to me, like Jaylen Warren, Najee's like cover for people not realizing that this dude is emerging as one of the best running backs in the league. He's versatile. He's a really good receiver. He's 215 pounds and just had like elite rushing efficiency. Seems pretty good. He's in an Arthur Smith offense. Like I just don't care about Najee Harris. Najee Harris is like fine. He's not as bad as I thought he was. He had a pretty good year last year.
Yeah.
But like I just don't care. Like you're telling me I'm getting run heavy offense, quarterback upgrade of some sort, no matter who it is, it'll be better than Kenny Pickett. Arthur Smith is going to design it's going to be a well-designed rushing game with plenty of attempts. I feel pretty confident about that. So I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, why do I need to predict the exact split? I'm getting an incredibly talented player with a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, as much as Najee looked more explosive last year, I think Jalen Warren, particularly in this full PPR form, is just going to do what we want him to do. Pat, I kind of didn't want to lurk on the player page too much because Dak Prescott had fallen 16 spots past ADP. Do we want to stack him up with CeeDee Lamb here? We've got 5 wide receivers and Derrick Henry and Kelsey so far. Or should we push him around the corner?
I don't know, man. This one feels like just take what the room gave you.
Before we back up, we've got at the top of the wide receivers, it's Romeo Doubs, Mike Williams, Khalil Shakir, Tyler Lockett, Rashid Shaheed. Then at running back, Raheem Mostert, Zach Moss, not Zach Morris, let's say by the bell, Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb. And then tight end, it's Brock Bowers, where the only time I'm pretty much taking Brock Bowers tends to be in these kind of builds. Anybody you're seeing, Pat, who you'd really like?
Honestly, this is where I would take Harris, or I would take Bowers.
Let's go. What bye weeks we got for Kelsey? Andrews even 14. Let's go with Bowers. I feel like I don't have enough Bowers, and the rise will be coming at some point soon. It just felt like because the offseason was as quiet as possible for Brock Bowers, he didn't test at any point. He had the pictures where he looked like, he worked in coding or something like that. And it just seemed like if he'd even gone out and run 140-yard dash, then everybody would have suddenly been back in on him. But yeah, I'm very much trying to stay ahead of the game on Brock Bowers a little bit. And somehow I've been more concentrated on the guys at the top of the draft. But I quite like hitting this point and just being done with tight end, really, rather than worrying about some of the late round guys.
No, I like that. Jacob Sanderson kind of got me back on the Bowers train. I was really into him as a prospect and didn't love the destination, obviously. And I just felt like, he should probably be more like in the 11th. But like, I'm not. Jacob just had me thinking, like, am I going to sit out Brock Bowers' rookie season? Because like, I thought he should be an 11th round pick instead of like a 9th or 10th round pick. Like, that's dumb.
So this is what
there's not that much different. It's like I was going like $1.50 too expensive in auction. Like what?
Yeah, like when drafts opened after the NFL draft, and I put together my rankings, and for our Discord users, I put together a list of targets and fades because I feel like that can be as helpful as rankings, really. And I'd put a note next to Lad McConkey, fine until the 7th round, and then immediately jumps into the 6th round. It's like, well, I can't have no exposure to him, so I'm gonna end up clicking him now. Jaden Daniels, at first it was like, I don't feel amazing about this, and this point's been made elsewhere plenty of times. The steam will come for Jaden Daniels, and I would rather I'd rather be sat at somewhere between 5 to 8% now, and then be able to decide what I want to do when we get into the real heavy drafting months of July and August, rather than try to play catch up at those points. So yeah, it's definitely a good time to just be a bit balanced and try and figure out those guys who you want to have at least some of. In terms of this range, like, I think we're doing pretty good. I've got CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Stephon Diggs, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, DeAndre Hopkins, Rashee Rice, Dak Prescott, and Brock Bowers. How you feeling about it, Pat?
Yeah, it's going to be what the room gives us at running back. And I've done, like, I did a 5-5-5 last week on here, and I got Brian Robinson, Javonte Williams at like pick 120, 121. Nice. Now Brian Robinson just went off. Javonte is also gone. So we're not going to get either of those guys, but you do sometimes see some pretty nice running back values around this. Yeah. So
we're in a nice pocket, though. I mean, you look at the team at the 104 has got 3 running backs. Steph's got 3 running backs already. And then Phil at the 1 spot has got 3 running backs. So I think we can be in a position where they're all slightly turning their attention somewhere else, and we might be able to capitalize probably on the rookies who I know Gretsch has been banging on about, that he likes to hit 2 or 3 of them in that range, the Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright area. So it doesn't feel too bad. But yeah, Brian Robinson's just been an auto click for me. Are you taking him ahead of Austin Eckler without hesitation?
Yeah. I think he's the guy there. He's been the guy. He's been pretty good. He hasn't been amazing, but he's been pretty good. He's consistent. He showed some explosiveness last year.
Eckler wasn't like one of the early signings either. It's not like DeAndre Swift who went off the board straight away. He sat there for a little bit. So yeah, I'm kind of fine with it. Of course, Eckler sits at the top of the queue as it comes round to us. And, we've scooped some good value already, so I'm not even going to make a case for him. As you can see, I'm sitting at 0% exposure. So it's Nick Chubb, Gus Edwards, Tajay Spears, Blake Corum in terms
I'd be
of
Spears.
Spears is the one player I like and gives us that little bit of extra add-on to DeAndre Hopkins. If you're looking at these tools and wondering where you can get them, these are the Spike Week overlays. Hit the join button down below. Use Golden Deck Chair level. Less than the price of a McDonald's. Far less than the price of a Burger King per month, and then you'll get 40% off all their tools. Absolutely changes the way you draft. So when we come back around, Phil is living in the wide receiver streets at the 101 a little bit more, and everyone comes back to us. Chase Brown, Gus Edwards, Blake Corum, Eckler, Charbonnet, Jerome Ford. And then in terms of wide receiver, it's Gabe Davis, which gives us some week 17 correlation, but I'm ahead on ADP, or Brandon Cooks for the stack. I know he's a bit dusty.
I think I would do Chase Brown.
I've lost Chase Brown.
Oh,
shit.
Who do we get?
We got Gus Edwards. It was,
okay. All right.
It could have been this. Yeah, that was my first time out of the season. Good to get one out of the way. Didn't you give Pete a time out the other day as well? Like,
I've been running cold on my streaming partners timing out.
Well, last year the worst one that happened to me was on a stream with Daigle. He asked me to queue up a bunch of Bills tight ends, and somehow I ended up double clicking both Kincaid and Knox in back-to-back picks, and that team did not advance out. Best round.
In what round?
It was very early. It was, I think we were kind of round 8 or so.
Oh no,
it was bad.
Oh man,
I think
this wasn't so bad.
Yeah, the DraftKings queue. I don't know how you find it, but like on these fast drafts, I find it really difficult. You got to click on, pull them up. It's not nice. I'm not a fan of it from that perspective. But yeah, and then Chase Brown, of course, goes to Steph, one pick after us. I have put us in a slight pinch with Gus Edwards, Tajay Spears on week 5 buys. But I mean, when you've built this kind of late hero running back build that we've gone with, do you think we're going towards a 5 running back room or a 6 running back room?
To me, it's a 6. I would do 6 here because I don't think Henry's like a true elite kind of, like I think he's a fine pick in the 4th round, but not. I just tried to give you Brown. We couldn't land on Brown. He was hiding.
So in terms of DraftKings, do you have a particular build that you land on more often than the rest, or something where are you building more kind of balanced in these early ones, or
Yeah, I tend to be a little more balanced because I get afraid that I'm going to get locked out in DraftKings. So like when we have the chance to take Dak, like I might push him on underdog because like I know, especially if I have other stuff set up, I'm like, oh, I could get something extra. First of all, if I'm pushing a guy, I always want to be like, am I actually getting something here? Or am I just trying to be cute? If I'm just trying to be cute, let me just take the guy that I actually need for the stack. But provided we were like getting something out of it, then sure, let me push Dak around and I'm going to be comfortable with quarterbacks later. But on DraftKings, like I have been shut out so many times on tight ends and quarterbacks. It's just, it ruins teams. Like, and I guess like credit to the people in the room with me because they're ruining my team and I'm dead. So I guess you win. But I'm nervous, man. If I'm like, I'm a little bit more balanced. I take care of it a little sooner.
Tight end just feels like if you've not got a good option by the time you get out of the 10th round. You're really struggling. Like, this area that we're in right now where Hawkinson goes, Komet, Frymouth, like, I don't want any part of this area. It's more like I'd rather just take volume and go with 3 quickly later on in sort of Hunter Henry or Fant range. But yeah, this area is definitely ugly. And Hawkinson, for me, I'll be content to just leave him until he's in the 150 range. Really, I just can't
That's
do
where
it.
I have him ranked. Yeah, I don't really have any interest in him where he goes.
So we're a few picks away. Nick Chubb continues to slide. Matthew Stafford, Rico Dowdle, Jahan Dotson, Aaron Rodgers, Quentin Johnston, Xavier Legette, who seems to be starting to get a little bit of steam. I've seen Bindles pushing him up some draft boards in the last few days. And then we've got Kendre Miller, who's up 6 spots in the last week. We've got Jalen Wright, who's fallen just a smidge. J.K. Dobbins, who I think barely touched. The first time I took him this year was in a draft for Eric Beinford, where he fell 55 spots past ADP, and eventually Eric just couldn't say no any longer. What are you thinking here, Pat?
Probably a running back, and I'd say Dowdle, Miller, Wright would be the 3.
Okay, let's go. I'd lean Kendre Miller if you're good with that.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Gives us the week 17 correlation against Brock Bowers, and I've just started to see just a little bit more consistent steam around him that
he's moving up. He's definitely moving up.
Feels like that one's going to be fairly steady for a little while as well in terms of picking up pace. Should we take Rico Dowdle here? Gives us more Cowboys, 137, a little bit of ADP discount.
That works for me for sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you want to make a shout for Jalen Wright, I'm happy to hear it.
No, I think Dowdle's good.
Cool. So through these rounds, round 13, we've got CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Stephon Diggs, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, DeAndre Hopkins, Rashee Rice, Dak Prescott, Brock Bowers, Tajay Spears, Gus Edwards, Kendre Miller, and Rico Dowdle. So we're now sitting on a 15552. Feels pretty good. In terms of when you take Dak Prescott, do you feel like he's viable in 2 QB rooms if we get a quarterback by sort of like the 14th, 15th round, or do you automatically kind of see him as a free QB build on DraftKings?
I think he's 2 quarterback viable. I mean, he showed that ceiling last year to really drive teams through the playoffs. So I think he's viable in 2.
Yeah, I mean, what we saw from him last year was just kind of crazy good. He had it was like 0.1 point per game average behind Josh Allen from week 9 to week 17. He had 6 games over 24.7 regular fantasy points. So on DraftKings, you're talking like, much closer to 30. All of those 6 games were good for top 3 weekly finishes. And it's not like the Cowboys have done anything at the running game to make you think, okay, well, this is going to be substantially better. So it just feels like it's going to be CD and Dak going nuclear again, unless the defense is so good that it keeps the offense off the field.
Yeah. No, I agree.
In terms of the rest of the room, a friend with a double elite quarterback, when you took Patrick Mahomes in round 1, Lamar Jackson in round 3, you got to follow it up with Matthew Stafford in round 13.
That's what I'm talking about. What do? You can't be like, there's no way this guy's taking Stafford. He might. Anyone might do anything here. You can't use game theory. It kind of robs you of like your predictive power on some of this stuff.
What's really interesting as well is they're building up Denver stack here with Cortland Sutton, Javonte Williams, and Troy Franklin. They've got Jerry Jeudy and Njoku. So I'm intrigued to see whether they go for 5 quarterbacks and throw in Bo Nix and Deshaun Watson in there just for good measure. You've got to dominate these non-super flex rooms and show everyone who's boss. Jalen Polk goes at the 13-11. That feels a smidge early. We've got Michael Heary here, who does a lot of great data visualization stuff with Established to Run, a lot of visuals from the Best Ball Manifesto. So a smart guy like him, knowing Polk won't be coming back. And I'm guessing...
But also, like, is it early? Like
It feels a little
Troy
early, but maybe
Franklin
I'm
went off
getting
the
wrong.
board. Although he's a
Yeah.
Stafford guy, so that doesn't necessarily tell you much.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess when you're talking Xavier Legette there, Malachi Corley must have been around ADP on that one. Yeah. So in terms of wide receivers who are towards the top, Quentin Johnston, Jermaine Burton, Roman Wilson, Wandale, Rashad Bateman, Michael Wilson, Luke McCaffrey. At tight end, Cade Otton, Hunter Henry, Isaiah Likely, Juwan Johnson. And running backs, J.K. Dobbins, Chuba, Algier, Vidal, Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, and Khalil Herbert. At quarterback, Will Levis coming up. We could take him to stack with Hopkins if he fell to us. Derek Carr slightly later on. I feel like, if we get one of those guys, we're probably all right. I don't know if you have a strong preference on what you want to do here, Pat.
I'd like a wide receiver if there's anybody. I think structurally that kind of fits best.
Yeah, Roman Wilson goes off board as I say that. Rashad Bateman would give us some more week 17 correlation.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty much Bateman or maybe I don't know.
McCaffrey's okay. What we could grab the quarterback, I guess. We could grab Vidal and just like have the Chargers guy.
Yep.
And then we're done at running back. So now we're just like we need quarterback and receivers and close it out.
Yeah, because we're done at tight end as well with Mark Andrews and Brock Bowers. So in terms of quarterback, any strong preference between Will Levis or Derek Carr? I kind of lean to Will Levis just because he's a bit more fun, but I don't mind taking Carr.
What about the receivers? I feel like I'm starting to get nervous we're going to get like locked out of anything.
McCaffrey or Bateman.
Yeah, I would grab one of those guys, I think.
Let's go with McCaffrey. I've been a little lighter on him than Bateman, and despite the steam coming out, I kind of feel good enough that Mark Andrews, Derrick Henry, Stephon Diggs is a nice enough correlation. Don't need to go too crazy on that game without Lamar. Luke McCaffrey, how did you feel about him as a prospect, Pat?
Not great. But I think generally you want to, the guys who tend to just like be kind of good, even though it's like, I don't understand why you're good, are slot receivers. And I think with McCaffrey, you're getting to bet on Jaden Daniels being pretty good and Jahan Dotson being bad. And I think both are pretty likely. And, you've got Bensonot kind of steaming up, but it's a rookie tight end versus a rookie slot. Like, I think McCaffrey's probably got the quicker learning curve. And, McLaurin is good, but he's not like a target dominant number one. He's kind of that.
You can put him in for he's going to get this. He gets the same amount of targets every year, regardless of quarterback. Right. The same amount of yardage every year, regardless of quarterback. Jahan Dotson, somebody I've got high hopes for, hoping that Jaden Daniels throwing outside the numbers is going to be an improvement on what's been there for the last couple of years. But I'm definitely not willing to. He's not a player I'm going to be at 20% exposure to, put it that way. And then, Bensonot, I just kind of worry that Washington's offensive line is so bad that even though it's good when a player is on the field doing a bit of blocking, and you wrote some great stuff about that, we want our tight ends to be able to block to a level. If he ends up having to do more blocking because the offensive line is so bad after they spent like one draft pick on the position, then I'm not sure I can see his fantasy ceiling being quite what we'd want for a 13th round pick when you've got Luke Musgrave, Pat Freiermuth ahead of him. I've been mixing a little bit of Luke McCaffrey, and I like the idea of him being able to pick up the easy receptions. But if Jaden Daniels can bring himself to not just get smashed pieces, it should be quite good for this PPR setting. We've got Chris in the chat saying, after you grab Vidal, this is where Pat goes, that opens up Drake May for week 17. Drake May goes to the Jalen Polk drafter out of the 11 spot. That felt like
11 spot.
It was coming after you take Polk there when you've only got one quarterback. In terms of the rest of this room, plenty of 2 QB builds. I've thrown with 3 quarterbacks, 3 running backs there. So, in terms of what we're after, I think we're going to hit the kind of lull in the draft where everybody feels okay about their quarterback room, and we should be able to piece together what we're wanting to do to an extent. JJ McCarthy goes off at the 1606 to the Justin Jefferson draft there. Do you think JJ McCarthy is going to be pretty fun for fantasy, or do you think there's any world where he sits behind Sam Darnold first?
I mean, maybe like for a game or two, but I don't know. I think he'll be okay. He runs a little bit. He's not as small as I was worried he might be. He's got a pretty big arm. That offense is well designed and fairly aggressive. So I think he'll be all right. He's more someone I'm hoping he facilitates the offense. Like I take Jefferson, Addison a decent amount. I don't really care if I get McCarthy though. Like you know, to me, I'm like
the highest ceiling at quarterback.
Yeah, and if I need McCarthy later, like sweet, I got a double stack set up as a back. I got sniped on something else. Like I was trying to build in, I might have like Ladd, on that team, or something else, a Jaguars thing, and go with Lawrence later. But if that gets blown up, I have McCarthy there.
Yeah. That makes sense. So we are a few picks away. Running back, Jaleel McLaughlin, Elijah Mitchell, Keaton Mitchell, Audric Estime, Roshan Johnson. Quarterback, it looks like our boy Derek Carr got taken 2 picks ahead of us. Is there anything you want to do at quarterback here to try?
What about wide receivers or anything? Yeah, DeMario's there, but we can't do that.
Yeah. Jalen Tolbert, we could take Demarcus Robinson, Javon Baker, 6 seconds.
I'd grab one of the Patriots guys, even though we can't stack it.
Take Demario Douglas. I think there's definitely a world where I know the shiny new toys are a little more fun, but I'm kind of fine with him. At quarterback, Bryce Young, Bo Nix, Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones would be the one I'd kind of push for, maybe, because I think there's still a couple of options we could add to him at this point in the draft.
That's fine. We got boxed out. I hate taking Jones. I hate it. He's going to get benched at the end of the year. He's got injury guarantees in his contract, so he's very, very likely he gets benched at the end of the year.
Yeah, it just feels a bit like if there's one quarterback who could give us anything in this range that's kind of helpful, it was possibly him. I'm okay with Bryce Young. I think Bo Nix have taken a little bit, but if it wasn't him, then I probably would have pushed past these two and just taken one of the Steelers quarterbacks and maybe Gardner Minshew.
Yeah.
What have you been doing when you've been boxed out to this extent, Pat?
Normally I have, like, I was, because I think we had a chance to take Mims in the last one, so I was sort of frustrated that I hadn't suggested Mims there, because that would have given the Bo Nix out. And that's like what I'm trying to do generally, is like give myself an out to one of those other quarterbacks. Yes, Drake May was in the back of my mind. Drake May got sniped. I'm not used to Drake May getting sniped. Drake May is just available whenever I feel like taking him. So, yeah, we probably need to build in. We should probably have built in a little bit more optionality with that McCaffrey pick, because I think we could have taken Mims the next pick. So that would have been a better pick for us, because it opens up another stack.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, at wide receiver at this point, it does get pretty scary. I drafted it with Colm yesterday. We ended up taking Wandale around this point because we'd gotten boxed out at quarterback. And it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? We took Wandale, then took Daniel Jones, gave ourselves a little bit. But there's really not huge amounts that I like. I think I don't mind taking Bo Nix and obviously compare him with the kind of Greg Dulcich bet and hope that maybe Greg Dulcich comes back to life. But when you've already got 2 tight ends in the first 9 picks, Mark Andrews and Brock Bowers, it doesn't feel really great to be like, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to take Bo Nix and grab Greg Dulcich just for the sake of having that late stack.
Yeah. I guess you could always grab Josh Reynolds.
Josh Reynolds has been one of those players. He just keeps popping up, just keeps getting a couple of spike weeks, enough to. Yeah. I mean, if Rashad Bateman had had a Josh Reynolds season last year, I would have been pretty happy.
I would have been pretty happy too.
25%. We've
See,
got
I was
Michael.
right. He's good.
Michael in the chat saying, I feel bad now for taking Drake May. Did have him.
No, I mean, you set it up correct. Don't feel bad. It's a good team you made.
And of course, he's got Josh Downs as well, who I know you were talking very positively about. Perhaps
I like
Michael.
Josh Downs a lot.
Michael might be listening to a little too much legendary upside to be in this draft. What have you got? Well, let's get to our next picks because things get a bit hairy if we don't.
Fields went. I wanted Fields pretty bad. That's the only thing that made me feel good about the Daniel Jones pick was that we could just take Justin Fields.
Yeah. So the rest of the quarterbacks: Bryce Young, Bo Nix, Russell Wilson, Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell. Yeah, there's nothing too inspiring there. We are done at running back, so wide receiver wise, Jalen Hyatt, I've been meaning to take a little bit more. I haven't taken any Darius Slayton if we wanted to add to this Daniel Jones pick that we've been forced into by the draft. Jalen Tolbert, which would give us a bit more Giants correlation, although I know Steph's a Dallas girl, so
sniped on Slayton.
Good Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Hyatt, Kendrick Bourne.
You know, it seems like Tolbert's kind of starting to steam up a little. It correlates with Dak. I think that's actually a pretty good one.
Yeah, I've been taking a little bit of Tolbert just because it felt like the Cowboys haven't been wanting to do anything. You know, they're not spending any money, they're not making any moves, and it just felt like he had a clear path to having a chance to progress after what he did last year. Back on the clock, Jalen Hyatt, Malik Washington, Michael Gallup.
I like Hyatt.
Right. Do you think, I know obviously Hyatt came out of Tennessee in quite a restrictive scheme. Do you think that there's any kind of chance that with Malik Neighbors there, that Hyatt can get into the slot? Like at the beginning of the offseason, we were talking about wanting to get him into the slot more often. Do you think that Neighbors is going to be a problem for him in that kind of way?
I mean, I think Hyatt's problem. Like, I don't think he's that good. I mean, I made a bet with Pete Overzet with the least conviction ever. He's like, do you want to do Hyatt versus Slayton? Because we did a bet not last year, but the year before, Slayton versus Wandale. And then Wandale promptly tore his ACL. But I think Slayton would have covered him anyway, but would have been close. But so we ran that back, and yeah, we get two Giants who I'm playing in week 17. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we ran it back with Slayton. I think Hyatt's. I mean, the initial reporting is that the starting 3 wide receiver set will not include Hyatt. It'll be Slayton, Neighbors, and Wandale.
But I mean, Slayton's holding out for his big contract, though. So you never know how that's going to play out.
We know how it's going to play out.
Yeah. It's a bold strategy.
Yeah. Let's see if it pays off. Yeah. I think Slayton, I don't know, Slayton's fine. Like he's a starting wide receiver for a bat. Like if you don't have a better option and you need someone to start for you, like Slayton will do it. He'll do it. He'll do the job. Much like Nelson Aguilar probably starts for the Ravens this year. It's like he'll be there.
Yeah.
He'll do it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of 3 wide receiver sets, I think it's going to take quite a while for Devontae Walker to get on the field ahead of Nelson Aguilar after the amount of times where he popped up last year and made reasonable level plays. Odell Beckham going in the 18th round. Have you found yourself taking Odell with any Tua teams?
I haven't. The Ravens, I mean, I thought the Ravens were saving him, and then it turned out they just were done. Like
it was so weird because as a Ravens fan, when you watched the games, the amount of times, particularly over the first half of the season, that Lamar forced the ball to Odell at times where it just wasn't working, throws which they weren't going to connect on. And you go, okay, well, maybe they're just trying to get warm so that by the playoffs it all hits. And then you look at the stats and it's like, okay, well, in yards per route run, he's actually really good and all this. And then it hits the playoff and it's like, oh no. And then, I mean, less said about what the Ravens did against the Chiefs, the better in terms of game plan. So maybe the playoffs in general, just a complete oversight. We're a few picks away for our final pick. We've got currently 2, 6, 9, 2. Are you happy to go up to 10 wide receivers on this one, or do you feel like there's?
I think we can.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about? There's like something to be said for just tacking on a naked quarterback here.
Yeah, I mean, we could do Bryce Young, Russell Wilson. I mean, Gardner Minshew, as disgusting as it is, gives us a stack with Brock Bowers. It's not something I've done at
It also
any
gives
point.
we have the Saints side of that. Remember, I said we could stack up both sides of the game.
Yeah,
that's how we do it, baby.
So, yeah, I'd be fine with quarterback because when you look at running back, there's AJ Dillon, Frank Gore Jr., Jordan Mason, Abanikanda, Gainwell, Louis Rees-Zammit. It's pretty bleak. And then at wide receiver, it's equally as bleak. I mean, I don't mind Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yeah, I think quarterback just adds the most to the team, like the most, biggest chance of us actually getting points out of it.
Yeah, so
and we need quarterback a little bit. Quarterback 2 is not going to play at the end of the year.
So, what do you think's more likely then? Should we take Bryce Young for pretty much guaranteed start in week 17?
I kind of am tempted to do that because we're getting a guy. We have 2 quarterbacks in week 17. Whereas, like, if you take Minshew and then he gets benched, and then you just have Dak, it's such a bummer. So I don't know, but I'm open to either. I guess we didn't have any Tampa Bay stuff, and we didn't have any Carolina stuff, so it's just totally naked Bryce Young. That's how you do it. It's important to grab totally, completely unstacked, uncorrelated Bryce Young in the 20th round. That's the best pick in the game. No one's talking about how good of a pick really completely naked Bryce Young is in the 20th, but he's the best. I mean, I struggle to think of anything you could do that's higher EV than that.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the last 5 rounds, it definitely got a little disgusting at times. Last year, when you came on this show, that was the area of the draft where I think we hit round 14 or so, and you clocked Nico Collins' ADP being about 35 spots later on DraftKings than it was on Underdog. And to contrast what we found from that sort of range in the draft this year, I don't know.
Well, so maybe Vidal's the league winner. Maybe we found another league winner.
Yeah. So to recap it, we got CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Stephon Diggs, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, DeAndre Hopkins, Rashee Rice, Dak Prescott, Brock Bowers. And if we were drafting first 10 rounds, I'd feel fantastic with Tajay Spears there. Gus Edwards, which was the first sign that things were going wrong.
That's when things started to get a little shaky, yeah. Because you know what that does? That I don't want to put this all on you, Tom, but Chase Brown gets us onto a Bronco, which gets us onto Bo Nix, which gets us off Daniel Jones. That's where it all went up. That's you can trace it all back.
That's it. This is going to be a fun one to track and see, that 2v2 of like Chase Brown and then taking Marvin Mims instead, as opposed to Gus Edwards and Luke McCaffrey. We did follow Gus Edwards up with Kendre Miller, Rico Dowdle, Vidal, McCaffrey, Demario Douglas, Daniel Jones, Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Hyatt, Bryce Young. So outside of some of the stuff that gets a little iffy, the actual makeup of the team, I feel pretty good about. Like, we got our elite tight end, Mark Andrews, who we both like. We scooped plenty of ADP value. We got 5 wide receivers through 7 rounds. Got a nice stack with CeeDee Lamb and Dak. And then in terms of the running back room, we've got Vidal in there. We've got Kendre Miller, and I like taking bets on second-year running backs, and we've got Spears as well as Miller. So there's some nice pieces. There's some iffy stuff as we go further down. Pat, any kind of global thoughts on the team that we haven't already touched on?
No, I just think the optionality is just something I'm trying to keep more in mind. And, that the Mims one would be an example. Like McCaffrey Mims is like truly a coin flip, I think. But when you're getting boxed out of some other quarterback options, opening up another one is really nice. And just trying to keep that in mind a little bit more. And then I wonder if pushing Levis was a mistake. Who did we take? Was it McCaffrey? Probably should have opened up a stack or completed a stack with the McCaffrey pick, and instead we took a guy that didn't give us any paths to a stacked quarterback.
Yeah, so that was the point where we pushed Levis and Carr were there, and it
Yeah.
it was completely realistic thing that one of them could have come back. I've seen Derek Carr go in the 200s on DraftKings, but Levis got taken there, and then Derek Carr was 2 picks away from us. And perhaps if one of those had come back, then we could have kept this at a 2 QB build and
Right.
concentrated on wide receivers in the range where we ended up having to take Daniel Jones. And yeah. In terms of a team from the 1 spot, I know Phil was asking in the chat saying if Sam Laporta was a bad pick after going Christian McCaffrey. We went CMC Debo, Sam Laporta for that nice week 17 correlation. Ended up with a 2-6-10-2 overall with Mari Cooper, George Pickens, Brian Thomas, David Montgomery, Raheem Mostert, Brock Purdy for the stack, Jacoby Myers, Trevor Lawrence for the Jags stack, Jahan Dotson, Xavier Leggett, Cade Otton, Bucky Irving, Roshan Johnson, Baker, Shipley, Devontae Walker, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Pat, do you think that's the kind of build that you can be okay with if you've taken Sam Laporta and that kind of had the 2 diversions within the first 6 rounds?
What did he do at tight end there?
So you had Sam Laporta and then Cade Otton.
Yeah, that works. I mean, the thing that's tough about this build to me is that like Jacoby Myers is your wide receiver 5, and then who is this wide receiver 6?
Dotson, who we also
Dotson, Leggett. I mean, that's okay, I guess. Like I like the Leggett pick a lot. And you could argue what our wide receiver 5 in a sense is McCaffrey. Demario Douglas. So that would be another thing I would say about our draft is like we
got away from wide receiver.
We got away from wide receiver a little too much. I think it would have been nice to take like 1 wide receiver mixed in that chunk of 5 that straight running backs we took because with the Bowers pick and with the Dak pick, there were 6 straight rounds where we didn't take a receiver, and I think probably like both these teams, I would worry about the wide receiver depth a little bit, ours and the 1 hole.
Yeah. In terms of other teams in here, Michael at the 11th spot finished with 2-5-10-3. AJ Brown, Drake London, DJ Moore, Jalen Hurts stack up with Brown, James Cook, Joe Mixon, hitting that double sort of round 5, round 6 running backs of the 2 who we kind of talked about liking: Evan Ingram, Christian Watson, Najee Harris, Tyler Lockett, Zach Charbonnet, Josh Downs, Polk, Corley, Herbert, Drake May, Knox, Demarcus Robinson, Crafton, Ioniah Smith. I mean, I really like that team. That's a team I would feel pretty confident about. Any of these other teams standing out to you, Pat?
I like the one with Drake May. Is that surprising?
Deft Angel, who's picking out the 10 spot, saying double rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. What could go wrong? How have you been taking double rookie quarterback builds at all, or do you feel like that's one where you need to lean towards 3 QB builds?
I don't think you need to lean towards 3 quarterback with these 2 guys. Like Daniels, it's either going to work or it's not going to work, right? If it works, he's hitting the ground running. You're not like, I mean, he's a true dual threat, So if he stays healthy and he runs as much as we're hoping, he's gonna provide a decent enough floor. And then Caleb Williams is not like your typical rookie. We said that about Trevor Lawrence, and then he was a disaster. So who knows? But I mean, it's a much better situation. Yeah, that was Urban Meyer. Yeah, no weapons and everything. This is very different. I think Caleb will be pretty productive out of the gate. So, yeah, usually we wouldn't necessarily want to go double rookie, but they're pretty well priced too. Like you're not paying like a ton for the upside. So I think it's fine.
So, Pat, I'm going to let you get out of here. Anything in particular coming up on Legendary Upside people should be making sure we check out this week?
Yeah, so we had earlier this week on Monday, we had Steph put out a Dynasty guide, a startup guide. So if you're in the Dynasty startup streets, that's a really good read. Highly recommend that. I'm working on a write-up of the running back landscape. I think it's kind of interesting to talk about, just kind of briefly touch on kind of what the landscape is compared to last year, what last year's results were, because it was pretty rough. If you took Like if you took a couple running backs early last year, it was pretty rough, even though we had some hits, which I think is like almost like more concerning. Like not all the picks were bad picks individually. And yet if you focused on running backs as the key, it was not the key. And so now it's like, well, wide receiver prices have risen. Does that actually make running backs now the key? Like we kind of like, you know, there was like, is it time to zig yet? Can we zig? Last year we tried, you know, if you tried to zig, I actually thought zigging was pretty dangerous in the sense of getting locked out of wide receiver. If you did get locked out of wide receiver, it ended very poorly for you. 2 wide receiver starts with 3 wide receiver starts, you know, so 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers through the first 5 rounds did well. Didn't do as well as 1 running back and 4 wide receivers, and didn't do as well as just no running backs and 0 wide receivers. That was so the less running backs you took, the better, as long as they went over to wide receivers. That was kind of the way to play it last year. This is a different environment though. So it's, you know, maybe it is time to zig. I don't know, but I'm going through and kind of asking the question, can we get this profile later? Is this price a historic anomaly? And what is the opportunity cost at wide receiver for this running back? So just taking a look at all the early round running backs, I'll probably go through like round 6 on that one. And then I might do a similar thing for the running backs going later to see if they basically, how effectively they're arbitraging the guys we might not be taking earlier. So that'll be out. Maybe that'd be up at like Friday or early next week, that kind of time frame.
Sounds great. I mean, yeah, dual RB is something I like the caliber of the second round running backs, but doing dual RB, the strategy that helped you win BBM, it just feels really, really scary at the minute.
It didn't work the year I won with it. It
No.
was not zero running back was the dominant strategy that season as well. In part, I mean, and maybe this is a case for going again, you know, for zigging, is that you're saying, this won't work. I'll just end up with a team that's different than everyone else's team if it makes the final. In my case, I had Austin Eckler, ended up being massive leverage on Justin Jefferson, who powered all these teams to the final. If you had a Justin Jefferson zero running back team, you know, that the fact that he dudded in the week 17 final and was massive chalk was a real problem. And, you know, the fact that I was able to have Austin Eckler go off when, you know, with the type of build that no one else would have had Eckler, or very few people had Eckler, not no one, was a huge advantage. So I guess it's an interesting tournament, you know, all of these tournaments where there's single week eliminations, because in that year, running back wasn't all that great of a strategy. Actually, it just so happened that I got a low kind of a leverage team through. I do think it's getting harder and harder though, is my feeling. Like you just cannot get locked out at wide receiver is my general feeling on it.
Yeah, I feel we could talk about this for hours, but it's like there are so many situations where it's like you can look at what works in terms of getting you to the final, but having those unique builds when you're in the final, it feels like that's what we're going to see a lot of at times. And whether that means that your advance rates suffer because you try these out there strategies, or whether that means that you just ignore them and just hope that the more comfortable builds work. It's going to be a very interesting season, and obviously we're in such small sample size of it, it's kind of hard to tell really. In terms of this channel, if you haven't already, check out the Elite Tight End video I posted on Saturday. It's pinned in the description below. I've got a quarterback video coming out in the next few days. We'll be along a very similar theme, looking at the dual threats against the pocket passes and what it takes for the pocket passes to outdo them. Rich has got more Dynasty coming, loads more content coming your way. So hit the like, hit the subscribe button, and we will be back soon.